Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go. Welcome to another episode of Nick Nack Goes to the Movies. And not just another episode, but it's another superhero movie or show episode. This time taking on way late, and I've said it's been ages since I put out a podcast, months and months, but we're back. So this time we're taking on The Flash. Now normally on Nick Nack Goes to the Movies, I'm pretty excited, at least to start, for anything in this genre. And maybe by the end of it eventually, I'm normally fairly pleased with these, or they're good enough, right? Maybe this is a bit of a superhero bias for this superhero fan, but outside of a few, I'm pretty into these modern day superhero movies, the MCU, the DCEU, everything really, even the pre-things, right? You guys know from the X-Men episode, big fan of the X-Men franchise. So with this movie, here we come, and honestly, before anyone really knew, I think this was hyped beyond belief. And this movie had the crazy responsibility to end the DCEU, and no one really knew what was going to happen. This could have potentially kicked off the newly minted DCEU. The newly minted DCU. There was a lot going on with the controversy with the lead actor, the up and down nature of the DCEU and Snyder, and everything else that made this just tough. We have seen that with all live action DC movies of late, outside of the Suicide Squad and the Snyder Cut of the Justice League. So with so much going on outside of this movie before it even saw the light of day, on top of all that, now we have to see what this all became, at the end of it all, what this movie was. Was it the proper swan song for what amazing nature we could have seen and had, kind of like Zack Snyder's Justice League, and maybe could this have been a tease of the vision for what those movies could have been? Or was this just a super mess? So before we get into too much, yes, Barry Allen and The Flash is once again played and portrayed by Ezra Miller. There was and still is controversy that has mired things with not only this movie, but potentially the last entry in the Fantastic Beasts franchise. So now that we have made it clear they are back in the role, they are fine in the role. We're talking just specifically the role, nothing outside of that. But the mind, in my mind, will always wander to Grant Gustin from the CW shows, at least a little bit. Especially after that TV show had a special 4 episodes, I think it was, crossover event. That included Miller, but somehow the same thing couldn't happen with Gustin in the movie even. Come on now. So, who else is here? We'll go over the main actors and after talk cameos, even though a bunch of those were spoiled and teased prior to the movie coming out. One of those tough things of the advertising and the actor rumors and castings coming out months seemingly sometimes before the movie aired to kind of take away some of those surprises. Billy Crudup was initially the father of Barry from some of the other Justice League movies. He was a Snyder cast guy, being Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. He only had a brief moment in Justice League, especially in the Snyder, which everyone was in that, and that was a long movie, so even through all that, it still was just a short moment. But I liked him when he was on camera, and I was looking forward to seeing him in the role and having more to do with a Flash-focused entry. Sadly, he was busy, and as things happen, he was replaced after so much had gone on and maybe even wrong with this movie. And instead, Ron Livingston, lead from Office Space, weirdly enough, if you think how long ago that movie came out, instead he was cast in this more pronounced role. Having never seen her in this iteration of The Flash, knowing the character, knowing their motivations, super important to have a strong actor and honestly a role within the movie for Barry's mom. She, in this Flashpoint story and the life and trajectory of Barry Allen, is crucial. And to her credit, Mirabel Verdú is a really good Nora Allen. And while she doesn't have much to do in this movie either, I feel like Kiersey Clemons has always been like teased in these Justice League things and never really had that moment to do something, where obviously with the TV show, with the CW, they gave Nora things to do in the plot almost immediately, but also you have more time to develop things. They did do some weird things with her character, but we're not going to go into that too much. But I think Kiersey Clemons felt right for the role of Iris. Look, we never saw her become the eventual wife of Barry Allen. We've barely met her, but at least she said words in this movie. There is so much to get to here, and a big problem sometimes is just that none of this had the time to breathe and develop. A problem also placed on, it feels like, the DCEU overall since the get-go and jump of its inception. And we've had a good chunk of movies, but it never felt like we really got those big development moments that it felt like we got from the MCU. I know there's some things of late of MCU has kind of tapered off a bit, and maybe superhero movies are going by the wayside. We don't know yet. I don't think we can make that assumption yet, but there's some cracks in the glass, I guess. But outside of who we've said, I think the big three in this movie were probably, at least going into it with the baseline advertising, that in theory these were going to have big roles for these people. Michael Keaton reprising his Batman role from the first two 90s movies. I know that was what drew me in. Sasha Calle, my first time seeing her in anything, as our first Supergirl in a modern live action movie world at least, and coming back after a long hiatus with, feels like ages ago, that 2013 role where the DCEU kicked off. Not Henry Cavill, don't get too excited. It was fun though to see Michael Shannon reprise his role as General Zod. Not sure if Calle as Supergirl had enough time to do anything to make a lasting impact on her role. Just in the one movie, Zod was cool, especially because there was a build-up from 2013. This was a little more fleeting, but it was gone quick, but it was cool while we had it. I think Keaton did the most for me here, and he had time to do things and had a role, but even that still felt rushed. Outside of that, we have these quick moments with a ton of actors that are not quite cameos. Gal Gadot thankfully had one more chance to shine, and it's better to have her at least wrap things up here with a couple of Justice League people as opposed to a movie that I was pretty bummed out about in Shazam 2 with how much I did enjoy the first one. I feel like she was cast well for the role. I know I've seen clips that break it down, and maybe I'm looking at it with too much excitement of what this Justice League looked like and could have been, but I thought she was good, and it's a shame that, like the entire rest of the Justice League that they had, no one is coming back now in the DCU. Now we know, since I waited so long to put this episode out, I got busy, football season and other things. But now we know that none of these people are coming back. It's just, I think Viola Davis. It is the guy who played Vigilante, John Cena, so a lot of James Gunn's people. Although Viola Davis was like a staple back in as early as 2016 for the first Suicide Squad, not the Suicide Squad, the one that David Ayer did. Still waiting for the haircut. And maybe the guy from Blue Beetle. I feel like I've seen mixed reviews on if he is or isn't, or mixed news, but at most it's 4, at least it's 3, but not any of the big heavy hitter role names are coming back, sadly. And of course, we knew that there were going to be a couple versions of Batmen appearing in this, and this world's Batman, played by Ben Affleck, along with his Alfred, Jeremy Irons, it was just nice to see those guys again, you know? I really did like their chemistry. I think the Snyder Cut gave them more, and it would have been really cool to see I know it was going to be an abridged universe no matter what, but like, you know, those 2 Justice League movies that never happened. Maybe that Batman was supposed to be in the new Aquaman that I don't think is happening now. And even just the solo Batman movie with Deathstroke sounded super cool. And, you know, we just got a lot of things ripped away, sadly, that are left on the cutting room floor. But people who watch this movie who are Nicolas Cage fans are going to feel the same thing for a movie we never got, but at least they got a little something in this. That's probably one of the most wholesome, nice things about this movie, but we'll get there. I think those had a little more than just a quick cameo, maybe less for Gal Gadot, but more clear cameo versions of characters existed with Tamora Morrison, who superstar Star Wars. I'm so happy that he's gotten to do so much more with just Boba Fett, with you know, he was in Kenobi, just to avoid, like, I'm so happy Tamora Morrison is getting as much Star Wars as he can get, and we're privileged to have that much. And then Jason Momoa. So both guys will be in Aquaman 2. We know there'll be something exciting there, but I liked the first one. I feel like I'm going to like the second one. I know I've heard mixed reviews for everything, DCEU and DCU and superheroes in general, it seems like, but I like both of them. Didn't get a lot to do here at all, but at least Aquaman 2 will be something to, you know, exist and maybe wrap things up. It seems like it's going to still exist in the DCEU because it kind of has to, but everything they've been saying is, well, their world in the ocean, it's less affected by the DCEU as a whole, so it can kind of be a somewhat self-contained movie, even though it's probably not going to do anything to push forward the DCU unless something drastically changes. But I do want to focus on Affleck for a moment and Irons, and honestly even go back to Justice League with a J.K. Simmons Commissioner Gordon, and he was going to be in the Batgirl movie too that got canned and sold off as a tax rewrite. So much untapped and unfilled potential to this grand plan. And I'm pretty bummed after all these years still. And this always happens when I talk about these movies. I go on this tangent of what could have been and what I really am just annoyed that we never got to see. For how quick Affleck was done in his role here, him like fighting goons in Gotham, and this happened in even I know we don't talk about the Joss Whedon, the Justice League, but I like those moments of seeing Batman fight guys in Gotham. Like, we don't get a lot of that in any of these movies as Ben Affleck, and like, it's nice to see some of that street level kind of stuff as a guy who is kind of a street level hero. And I think they knew what they were doing, and in a good way of kind of like this Batman kind of talking with Barry and making that kind of the mentor relationship without having a Robin that we also never got to see what happened there. That's a pretty good foil on paper to the Robert Downey Jr. Tom Holland relationship from Iron Man and Spider-Man. And I'm not saying The Flash is executed as well as Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but I think Ben Affleck did some nice things, not to Robert Downey Jr.'s level, but they had much more time to develop those characters and those roles. And I think Affleck was good And like Miller was pretty up and down, but Affleck was good. I hope that people will think of his Batman and think of the good that was there and not just the mess that the DCEU devolved into. I, just like some of you, saw so much potential for this cast, and be it a solo Batman movie here or some culmination of the Justice League series, and we've read what things could have been. Everything sounds cool to me, between Batman being hunted down in his world, taken down by Deathstroke, seeing the Legion of Doom forming and fighting our heroes, and then obviously the major war at the end with Darkseid, just a wrap up to obviously the time jump stuff. I'm just bummed out. This movie is very all over the place in itself. Some things are fun, some good, but the bittersweet nature, even if this is a peak movie, if The Flash was a 10 out of 10, never had a 10 out of 10 or a 5-star movie I've ever rated on Letterboxd. But I just always feel just this pang and twinge of just, oh gosh, what could have been. The same way that the Snyder Cut of Justice League, but that was just way more of a solid movie overall. Cameos are going to be super loose here. So many were archival footage clips used in a super weird method to distribute all these cameos in short order. Some actors who are since deceased, some who are just much older now, Christopher Reeve, George Reeves, Helen Slater, and Adam West. I don't even know what to think that with all the old Flash actors we could have had from the CW and the older one, like, not one could have been used here. Like, that's messed up. Really, the only exciting cameo of the sequence, seeing other old footage of, like, really the only exciting cameo of this sequence, seeing other old footage or weird CGI things, like what they did to Henry Cavill was unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. But it was fun and amazing to see a new scene shot with Nicolas Cage as Superman. The history there is amazing to see. The canceled Tim Burton Superman come to life for a moment. You can tell this is the best cameo out there with the length and newly made scene for it. If you want more info on this, just this whole project, go watch the super fascinating documentary of that movie titled The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened? Sadly, at the moment of recording this, doesn't seem to be on any streaming platforms, but keep your eyes peeled because it was a super interesting watch. And lastly, a couple Batmans, not just two apparently. George Clooney, well, three because they had the Adam West thing, but the fourth one I guess they had was George Clooney being back as Bruce Wayne. That was unexpected, but also super fun. We will get into how we got a couple Batmen in this movie, and somehow not one was Christian Bale. They wanted him, but I'm sure he just said no. There's no way they wouldn't have wanted him. Would have been neat to see him and Michael Caine back in the cowl and suit respectively, but I think they probably did the right thing staying away from this. I said semi-mess, but really, we can call it a mess of a movie. Spoiler to my opinion here as I break it all down a little more in depth. I will start off with this. The humor derived from any version of The Flash within the DCU, especially in this movie, was just not it for me. Subtly, and in the Snyder Cut of Justice League, it worked in small doses. I don't know why. Was there just more of those weird jokes? It didn't really work in the Whedon stuff when they made that movie. And honestly, here in the solo outing for this character, where if you're the star of the movie, you think, it's going to be noticeable if the humor works or doesn't. And in this outing for this character, it just felt like there was too much, and it never really sang like it needed to. Grant Gustin was not perfect. The CW Flash was not perfect. But for what he had to work with, I think they balanced the jokes. The jokes were good. the hope and optimism was there for the character, and also balancing that with the tragic backstory and tortured nature of the character. Like, oh man, it was good, you know? Now, the best Flash for me, weird to think about when I say the actor, Michael Rosenbaum, of course, from Smallville, with Somebody Save Me. He voiced the character in the really good animated follow-up to, the Batman show and Superman show with Justice League and Unlimited. Is probably, for me, Michael Rosenbaum's Flash is in the same way that Green Lantern, for me, will always be Jon Stewart, not Hal Jordan, and voiced by Phil Lamar. I think they maybe had one episode where they had like a Hal Jordan flip between with him and Jon Stewart, but that show just had so many good voice actors and so many good portrayals of characters. That whole animated series, that Static Shock, so many good shows. Batman Beyond, like, early animated TV show Justice League was very good for me, and I grew up with some of that stuff. I think I was a little young, or maybe I just missed the Batman stuff as much in a consistent manner, but I watched a ton of Beyond and Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. It's crazy how an animated show or series on Cartoon Network from the early 2000s can have more depth, and you could say about TV shows having time to develop. But look, other movies have had shorter series and still developed characters well. There are even movies with one that have developed characters well, so I don't want to give them too much leeway. But even just beside the depth, this show from the 23 years ago just had a better understanding of characters compared to this big budget blockbuster live action movie thing. I like TV shows have the longevity, but it's tough to not think about how good some of that stuff was growing up, and then adult Nick coming into the scene, and comparing it to how rushed some of this DCEU stuff was and how it felt like they just never could nail down what makes the Flash from a visual perspective. I am not a comic book expert. I will never claim to be one in a million years. I've read The Walking Dead and some of The Boys. That's about it. From what I've seen in visual media portrayal of the Flash versus the DCEU Flash, there's no comparison how much better the animated one is. But with all that, I want to go back to the CW Flash a little bit. That show had the Flash, it had his friends, it had the job, and we kind of got a little bit of everything, right? And with how the DCEU Flash started in the Justice League, with what we know, that Flash was really looking for friends, and that's why they gravitated towards Bruce Wayne and Ben Affleck so much, because that was like the first friend they had. So, looking at that, this Flash has apparently work friends. We'll never meet them. They didn't matter apparently at all. The job seemingly didn't really matter at all, which is crazy because the job is kind of an important driving force of the crime and trying to solve it and trying to solve their dad's murder and all this other stuff that just blink and you miss it. We know very little about this Barry in what we'll call the present day primary timeline. Thankfully, we get some time interacting with Batfleck, the alter ego, Bruce Wayne as well, and even a fun, subtle Gal Gadot moment. I don't think now it's official that there is no third Gal Gadot movie. That would have been really confusing with the DCEU ending, and she's not keeping her role, apparently. None of them are. There's always a chance something could change. I know there have been rumors of the Wonder Woman 3, but it seems like it's done. Seems like Aquaman 2 will happen, and then this will all be done and behind us. And we'll think of what could have been, watch the good ones and not watch the bad ones, and that'll be the end of the DCEU as we know it. And it was fun to see all these, characters interact and the things that happen between them one more time. More Jeremy Irons Alfred, always good, because same thing, he was like a father figure to Bruce, and he kind of became a father figure to Barry Little. He became a father figure to the whole Justice League, it felt like at times, honestly. I just feel like outside of those moments with the Batman Alfred moments, the Flash stuff just didn't do it for me. The Flash didn't shine in the own Flash movie, which is crazy. The interactions about being awkward and quirky just don't feel like the Flash should be about. Like, there's just these weird side quests of the Flash saving babies falling through the sky, and one's in the microwave. It's just weird. Like, the stuff kind of sucked, but like, knowing Ben Affleck is probably done wearing the cape and cowl now, not probably. I mean, he's not, but never say never. I'm holding out hope there'll be a moment in Aquaman 2, even though I feel like they've even confirmed that it's just not a thing. But seeing Ben Affleck fight his crime, hearing him give the wise, sage Batman advice to Barry, that's the stuff I'm going to miss. And he said, like, he really figured out the role in this movie, which is crazy because in a matter of minutes, he's done. He disappears from the timeline existence, and that's just it. And even though maybe some of the Wonder Woman stuff was a bit cringe, blame that more on the interactions between, like, Wonder Woman and the Flash. Like, in the same way that the Wonder Woman moments were kind of cringy, the way that she was used in Shazam 2. So, do not put that on Gal Gadot. It stinks that Iris really never matters here either. Like, I was hopeful and curious to see what her role was going to be. But like the friends from work, she never got a chance to matter at all here. Like, at least we touched on her existence in the Snyder League cut. But man, did we not get anything more from her character. Same thing. She could have been cool and had some moments, but all these moments with these other characters that you want to see are just sucked away because of these awkward scenes with Barry Allen and humor that just never really ever lands for me. But just from an interest standpoint, this does lead to the big moment, the big incident to kick off Flashpoint. It's a much more muted one compared to what we might have hoped and dreamed for. Man, was there so many rumors about what the Flashpoint. The movie was supposed to be called Flashpoint, but then it just became The Flash, and then here we are. Barry's back in a timeline where their mom is alive, and that should be exciting and cool. The whole Allen family is back. Dad's out of prison because the mom didn't get murdered. It's a recast actor, which is all fine. I think of other ones that would bug me more. This one, you always get annoyed about continuity not existing because of recasting actors, but this one was not as obviously a big change compared to some other ones. Think of like The Mummy 3 with Brendan Fraser and a very different leading lady who is apparently supposed to be the same character and very much not. I hate recasting in franchises if we can avoid it. Now, this moment and on has a lot of brutal humor, and part of that has to be blamed with, if you're not a fan of necessarily one Ezra Miller Flash, then you're in trouble because there's a multiple Ezra Miller Flashes. Like, think about what we could have had with a Flashpoint, like a proper Flashpoint. I think people were so excited and curious to see what a Jeffrey Dean Morgan, more aggressive Batman could have been, like in the normal Flashpoint storyline, and with how much we like Jeffrey Dean Morgan from many, many good roles. We'll see what his boys one is. It's apparently not Tech Knight now, obviously, as we learned in Gen V, but like, man, I just wanted to see more Jeffrey Dean Morgan because what a cast. I know he's another Snyder guy because of Watchmen as well, but seeing him so briefly in that beginning, you kind of hoped you would see eventually him don the cape and cowl just for a moment with this alternative timeline. And even though the multiple flashes is not great compared to what we would have liked, there are some neat moments like, okay, right, breaking into CCPD, cool. Like, I had to remember it wasn't Star Labs, which is a place which, once again, like a lot of Flash things, just doesn't matter at all to the Flash. And this was to recreate the moment of getting Flash powers, because you play with timelines. It doesn't always work out. Everyone's doing time travel stories now, after all. Even Indiana Jones somehow is doing time travel stories. Just whenever there's a moment, you're like, oh, that's kind of a neat moment in the Flash. There's always a weird joke of the two Millers making jokes at each other. And every time you're like, there could be a moment, just something becomes less impactful because it's not a build up to it. And there's just these weird jokes. So everything's just kind of hollow, honestly. A lot of people probably know the Flash origin. But things should be accessible to those who do not. Spider-Man is one thing because we've seen it so many times in movie form. I don't think Flash is as knowledgeable to the general populace of movie watchers who aren't necessarily comic book people. The only reason I know is because of the CW Flash. Speaking of that, I always, now when I watch this movie, I've seen it twice now. I think about, like, if there could have been a way to hybrid all of this the way that the CW Flash show was able to do things and do justice to the Barry Allen story. I mean, I even think, man, the villain in this movie is really a problem compared to how strong, like, the villains were in the CW show. And not every single one, because there's some doozy villains, but some villains they really got right in the CW shows, the Arrowverse as a whole. But Reverse Flash was a good villain, and the main villain in this movie, not good. It's not Zod. If you think it is, it's not. I'll put that out there now. But man, they just could not figure out, and they clearly had a villain problem. And like I said, and I've maybe said this too much, but after the cameo of the CW show from Miller, which was a super cool thing to see on live TV, like watching that thing right on the dot for the first time and no one knew it was coming, sick. You're telling me they couldn't find a way to get Gustin on this movie? Get out of here, scram, that's crazy, you sound crazy. But pretty quickly we do get one of the cooler moments of the movie. Would it have been cooler as a surprise? Of course. But the coming out party for, once again, the evil Kryptonians and General Zod invading Earth again, like, it's a cool moment how it just sort of like, oh no, timelines change, but like, Barry remembers this movie. And it's cool that, probably the coolest thing in the movie is the idea and the notion that OG Flash was around for this event, and having like a PTSD of this happening the first time around and trying to save someone, not really being able to do it. They had like a really ragtag costume, and that was easily the coolest thing for me. Like, to have DCEU connections that didn't feel forced or rushed. And I like things going back, and even though this movie was known that this is probably the end, to still put those moments in there, like, that was so cool to me. I can't explain how, in a movie that was so whatever, that when that happened, I was so into it. Speaking of not rushed, this invasion scene starts, and it feels like it takes forever, which so many things happen between this moment, like introducing this as a problem that's going to happen, getting a team together, and finally having the conflict happen. It feels like so much time and so many events happen between those two things, which is crazy how long they're apparently willing to have. So no surprise, the Flash, only one of the Flashes even has powers right now. No Justice League exists. I don't know what I would have wanted in this movie at times. Maybe that's the problem, is you have so many hopes and expectations, and this just isn't it. It was cool seeing Tamora Morrison exist, but it was just another, and not even a Barry Allen joke, just a weird joke that left a sour taste in my mouth for how much I love that actor. I don't care what anyone says. I liked the darker superhero tone of the DCEU. I like things that are a little dark. I make usual cries for maybe the Air cut will happen, because now we definitely don't think the DCEU is happening. But I think maybe recently there was some note about Gunn saying that like David Ayer's thing would eventually come out. I would love it. I can't wait. I really hope it comes out. I don't know if it's going to make that much difference in the movie. I know everyone says it's not, but I will buy the heck out of that movie when it comes out. And I'm still waiting for that Spider-Man more fun version of the latest movie with whatever the extra 14 minutes is, because it's crazy that it still hasn't come out in physical release. I'm just trying to get it all out there, and maybe the right person will hear this. I doubt it, but you never know. And kind of that notion I'll go back to of like things that should be cool with actors, that should be cool, and just a weird way of introducing them with weird jokes just makes everything fall flat. Same thing happened with introducing this latest version of Batman. Should have been cool. Part of it was. But the legend Michael Keaton coming back, so that could have gone longer with Batgirl and the proposed Batman Beyond movie. Now it's all rubbish. Probably never to happen. Like, he came off as a weird hermit joke of a character that we all saw and loved before. What a bummer, weird way to introduce a super cool and good actor coming back for a role for a long time. And I'm not trying to be one of those Star Wars haters, because I love Star Wars, I love superhero things and all this other good stuff. But if that story sounds familiar, it might be because it was really familiar to what they did with Mark Hamill and Luke in the Episode 8 movie. At least there's that, Mandalorian something to make you feel a little better about the character of Luke and what is canon based on movies and stuff versus all the books that we have. And I own on my bookshelf of all the cool classic non-canon now Star Wars Luke Skywalker things. Gosh, another bummer. I'm really getting bummed out just thinking about all this stuff, man. Gosh, tough episode. But I'm good to be back. Can't wait to jump into some other stuff too that's a little stronger in media. But I was happy Keaton was back. Easily one of the best MCU villains of all time. One of the best Batman as well. I don't know if eventually maybe I'll have to try to figure out if I can lock in a Batman actor ranking, because there's a lot of good ones. And maybe some less than good ones, but a lot of good ones. And this movie did have some classic Keaton Batman references and moments throughout, and those are nice. It just took a small moment to get to the cool, non-hermit, like normal Keaton Batman. But eventually, it's a small squad of like 2 Flashes, and admittedly a now cooler Keaton on the way to add just one more member to Diet Justice League Light. And it's allegedly a super person. Now, look, everyone's thinking, could it be Superman? Could it be Henry Cavill? Like, in the world of the movie. But every viewer knows that's not a thing, and we all know it's Supergirl. And once again, advertising kinda drops the ball. And honestly, we'll get to it, but I have to put it out there, the fight CGI, very weird in this movie. Something went worse with the super person style of fighting. It just always looked worse. I don't know what the budget was or what happened, but chalk it up to another thing in this movie that just didn't get it right. But the big trailer moment of the Barrys and Batman Keaton going off to a snowy prison, not unlike what they did in the Black Widow movie. Somehow these things in fiction are always in like Siberia to rescue, once again, the assumed Superman. It would be cool if it was Cavill as Superman, but the trailers quickly squashed that and showed us our first and sadly our last look at this Supergirl. The notion of holding an L in a government holding facility so they don't get all their son's superpowers until later. That's a peak Flashpoint story thing, which this is all very loosely based on. And I mean loosely, but it's nice that they kept some of the pieces, I guess. Thankfully, this Supergirl gets her powers. Weird animated style, but fun fight moments nonetheless between her. Keaton has some great stuff with some Batman moments. This all happens along the way. And then eventually the two Barrys both get their Flash powers. After this, things get even a bit weirder. We have a bit of a worse way to compare like the big fight, right? We saw the big Man of Steel fight in... Once again, we have just a light version here. And it's not the Flash movie's fault, but like... You had this big climactic thing. Then you have this weird version of it played out here, and it just feels smaller and worse, and I don't know. It's just so many things you wonder what could have been. I love that Michael Shannon is back as General Zod. I love that Barry was there for the first cataclysmic event. Kind of like how the Snap is such a story beat in the MCU for a ton of characters. It was cool that this invasion of Earth in the Man of Steel movie was like an event that seemingly a lot of people were aware of and like kind of around for, and that's just a cool thing. But sadly, things with that Snyderverse are pretty much frozen in time and maybe even dead to time. So curious to see what Aquaman 2 will look like as most likely the final true epilogue of whatever this could be. Definitely some similar story beats for Man of Steel as kind of you would hope there is. The Codex thing is back of finding all the DNA from all Kryptonians. And it lives within Supergirl like it lived within Kal-El. Unlike the first time, though, there's no huge build-up. And the big momentum moment in DCEU history feels like a shell of itself. Soon enough, the fight, you're like, oh, it's going well. But just kidding, Supergirl and Batman are both dead and Zod wins. Being a time travel movie, you know that this is not the end. And like Justice League, Barry goes back in time to save them both. And you say, cool, it'll work the next time. But just kidding, no matter how many times, it just doesn't work. And our main Barry quickly realizes it's becoming a multiversal problem with the other Flash is all on board with breaking the fabric of reality to be a hero. But while that is fun to think that this is, the time to get all these cameos in, some are done very whatever. We never did get a great Superman, and a lot of the old ones just feel worse compared to the majesty of what the CW did with Crisis on Infinite Earths and the crazy deep cuts they got into there, including this version of The Flash with their version of The Flash. At least having Nicolas Cage have a long overdue moment of being Superman, kind of in the outfit with the long hair and fighting a villain that kind of was the right tone for how weird that movie was supposed to be. Great. I just wish they could have found a way to use the cameos a little better compared to the blink and you miss it parts. And like even the Mortal Kombat 1, X and 1 both have been X11, well, not really X, 11 and 1 have all been a little time travel-y and multiversally. But even they're doing some kind of neat things like that and bringing players and characters in and back and around and like, I don't know. So many of these things have been done of late, and it just felt that the Flash movie was really, really lazy with it. And somehow we never got a reverse Flash moment. And I know you could say it's all because it was quick and underdeveloped, like if they had Justice League 2 and then put a bunch of stuff of solo outings and then done Justice League 3 or something like that. Maybe they could have found a way to do all this. Because someone killed Barry's parents, and it wasn't Barry, I don't think. And if it was, I missed that part of the movie, and it makes no sense. But but instead it was just an evil Barry who made that evil Barry was an older version of this timeline's Barry. So now there's 3 Barrys. Super confusing until evil Barry accidentally stabs the younger version of that Barry to kill them both. And man, is it a trip, but then we're back down to just the one Barry. And that somehow kind of resets everything, where not much has changed. We as an audience know there's no future for the DCEU. And like there are some nice emotional family moments of the Allen family getting some moments together. And I will say the Barry and Nora stuff, especially young Barry and Nora, like there are some nice emotional moments that are tucked away and hidden to this movie. Just not a lot of the good moments in this movie. That there's always something around the corner that's going to make you groan and just be like, wow, this movie has like a bit more serious. Could have been a really cool movie. And it just wasn't it. But like there is some nice things, right? In this present time, Barry, the whole Allen family's back together. Dad's free from jail. We didn't have the build up to it, and honestly, the entire Flash growth is, if we're being generous, 2.5 movies. It's probably closer to like 1.5 in all honesty. Maybe two flat, I guess, but it felt brief. And it feels like if you look at this movie for kind of the main Barry family through and through, beginning to end, it just comes on so quick with how long it took Barry to bring the family back together. It's super rushed, which is how a lot of things felt. Boy, was I feeling a little zesty and sassy ripping into this movie, working on this episode. But after a long hiatus of podcasts, things are coming in hot. While there's not much to say in this very, very up and down movie, tonally and quality-wise, like, there's a nice resonance of having Bat Clooney to come back as a Bruce Wayne after his less than stellar review in his one movie, Under the Cow. The review that I'm giving right now, it feels ages old by now, but I'm happy it's out. So let's get that score out there, put this one to bed, and just get back to Knick-Knack Ghosts in the Movies podcast in a more regular way, because I have not been doing good in the year of 2023 getting episodes out. So what are we rating this movie? 2.5 out of 5 stars. We're just going to put it out there. That might be high. It might be some nostalgia. We'll give it a 2.5. It's, it's okay. It has some moments that, as a DCEU fan, you're kind of forced to like. And Shazam had this too, with Shazam 2, but like, being less connected, there's less reasons you need to care. I cared about this a bit because of some of the other DCEU things, but I don't see myself feeling the need to watch this movie again and again. I would probably, and this is going to maybe be crazy, this movie's probably in the world of like Thor Dark World, where you could watch it. There's some things you're going to like, but there's definitely some things you're not going to like. I think Thor Dark World might even be better than this. I don't know. Gosh, it's weird to think about. Just some of these movies just aren't not super as you want them to be. So that's my stance. And a bit of a lackluster end cap to the DCEU. We are all waiting with bated breath to see the TBD of Aquaman 2 and what that final dive into the DCEU will look like. Most likely it'll be done and that's just it, and it'll just sort of end. No crazy resonance, and we're on to the DCU and whatever James Gunn's going to do. But this movie, The Flash, though, had the weight of the world on its shoulders. It had to be a good DCEU movie. There have been some lackluster ones to date. It had to give a satisfying end to the DCU and essentially the Snyderverse, and it kind of had to answer how an end is possible with so many dangling plot threads that were never going to get solved. And there is such a what if, what could have been now. And all that rests on this movie. And no matter what, besides all that, this was, of course, like kind of has to be said, there's a polarizing nature to the lead actor for this movie. And it just couldn't even if it had to be a perfect movie, it was going to be tough. And it was just not a perfect movie and had a lot going on outside of that. But what did you think of The Flash? And honestly, what are you thinking about the future of what the new DCU live action movies will be? Now that we know a couple actors sticking around, and obviously James Gunn does have some cred, some street cred that can give you maybe some confidence, but I just want to know what you think. You know, what's in the near future, what's down the road. Let me know on social at either Knickknack Movies or Knickknack_IC. I'm on Twitter, or I guess X now. I'll still call it Twitter, but beside that, Instagram, TikTok, and of course Letterboxd, where I've been logging movies like crazy. Haven't been putting out a lot of episodes, but been logging them like crazy. So definitely check out there, see what I've been doing. I'm going to try to be consistent with these episodes way more than I've been, and I apologize to you, the listener. I've just been crazy busy trying to work on work, trying to work on the weight, trying to work on so much other stuff, trying to get a date. But we're going to work on all of it, including the podcast. Life finds a way. And that's it. So cheers. And as always, until next time, cinephiles, hopefully a lot sooner. So take care.
Are you not entertained?
I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.